His breath was hot against my skin, every exhale sending shivers racing down my spine. The closeness was unbearable and yet irresistible. His chest pressed firmly against mine, his lips grazing the edge of my jaw as if he was daring me to stop him. I didn't. Instead, I melted into the warmth of him, my body betraying every secret I had kept for years. His hand found mine, fingers sliding between my own, gripping with a need that felt both desperate and certain. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it, but he didn't pull away. He leaned closer, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that wasn't rushed. It lingered, teasing, sending sparks everywhere. The taste of him was intoxicating. I wanted more, needed more. When he whispered my name against my ear, I swear I forgot where we were. Nothing else existed, just the delicious ache building inside me. The way his touch made me feel like I was floating. Every kiss deepened. Every movement pulled me closer to something I could only describe as heaven. This wasn't the boy I once admired from afar. This was a man whose touch set me on fire, whose voice made me weak, whose presence made my knees tremble. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in my head, but the reality was sweeter, sharper, more dangerous. His lips trailed lower, his hands tightening around my waist, and I knew there was no turning back. It was reckless. It was intoxicating. And it was unforgettable. But to understand how I got here, let me take you back. I never thought an ordinary Tuesday morning would lead me here, caught in this whirlwind of emotions I can barely put into words. Back then, my life felt simple, almost predictable. Classes, part-time work at the campus cafe, late-night study sessions, and endless cups of cheap coffee. That was my routine. Nothing extraordinary, just the steady rhythm of a college student trying to keep her head above water. But even in that routine, there was always one thing, or rather one person, who broke through the monotony. His name was Ethan. Ethan wasn't just another face in the crowd. He had this quiet confidence about him, the kind that didn't need to shout to be noticed. Broad shoulders, an easy smile, hair that always seemed a little tousled as though he'd just walked out of the wind. He wasn't the loudest in class, nor the one constantly vying for attention. And yet, whenever he entered the room, my eyes seemed to find him instantly, like they had no choice in the matter. We weren't strangers, not exactly. He was in 2 of my classes, and sometimes he'd even stop by the cafe where I worked. But we weren't close either. To him, I was probably just another girl from campus, maybe the barista who remembered his usual order, black coffee, 2 sugars. To me, he was the definition of a crush, someone just out of reach, someone you admire from afar because the idea of actually confessing feels too terrifying. There were moments, though, fleeting ones, that made my heart skip, like the time I caught him looking my way during a lecture. I told myself I was imagining it, but the heat in my cheeks said otherwise. Or the way he once held the door open for me, his eyes locking with mine just long enough for me to forget how to breathe. My friends knew, of course. They teased me about the way I always seemed to perk up when Ethan was around. I'd laugh it off, pretending it wasn't that serious. But deep down, I knew it was more than just a silly crush. It was something that lingered, something that made me wonder what if. The funny thing about crushes is that they sneak into the smallest details of your life. A song on the radio would make me think of him. I'd catch myself doodling his initials in the margins of my notebook like I was back in high school. And every time he walked past me, my pulse raced like I was about to run a marathon. Still, I kept it all to myself. Because why risk ruining everything? Why risk finding out he didn't feel the same? It was easier to stay quiet, to admire him from a safe distance, to live in the dream instead of facing reality. That was my life for months, until that one fateful evening. It had been a long day. My last class ran late, and I was exhausted, juggling books and a half-empty coffee cup as I hurried toward the elevator in the library building. The doors were just about to close when I saw him. Ethan. He slipped in at the last second, his hands stopping the doors with effortless ease. And just like that, it was the 2 of us. Alone. The silence in the small space felt heavier than it should have. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and unsteady, and I was sure he could too. I stood in the corner, clutching my books like a lifeline, trying not to stare, trying not to make it obvious how nervous I was. If only I had known then what that moment would lead to. If only I had realized that sometimes life doesn't care about your careful plans or your quiet fears. Sometimes it throws you right into the arms of the very person you thought you could never have. And for me, that moment started in an elevator. The elevator ride that night was only supposed to be a quick one, 3 floors, maybe a minute at most. But sometimes the universe has other plans. When the doors slid shut, I became hyper-aware of everything. The faint scent of his cologne, the sound of his steady breathing, the way his presence seemed to fill the entire space even though he wasn't standing close. I tried to act normal, staring at the glowing numbers above the door as if they were the most fascinating thing in the world. But then, as fate would have it, the elevator jolted. Not hard, just enough to make me stumble slightly. One of my books slipped from my arms and landed on the floor with a dull thud. Before I could bend down to pick it up, Ethan crouched first, his hand brushing mine as he handed it back. That one accidental touch was all it took. A spark. Not literal, of course, but it felt real enough. My stomach fluttered. My skin tingled where our fingers had grazed. He gave me a small smile, the kind that looked effortless yet warm, and said, "You okay?" I nodded, though my heart was racing far too fast for such a simple moment. It wasn't the first time I'd felt that spark. Thinking back, it had been building for weeks, maybe months. Little things, like the way he'd glance over in class whenever I raised my hand, or how he'd sometimes wait a beat longer at the cafe counter, as if trying to think of something else to say before walking away with his coffee. I remember one afternoon in the library. I was sitting alone, surrounded by stacks of notes and trying to make sense of them all. He walked by, paused, and then, surprisingly, sat down across from me. We didn't talk much, just exchanged a few words about the upcoming exam. But the air between us felt different, charged in a way I couldn't explain. Every time he leaned forward, I caught the faint scent of his cologne again, and my thoughts scattered. Another time, during a group project, his arm brushed mine while we worked side by side at the computer. It was nothing, just an accident. But my body reacted as if it were something more. I tried to focus on the screen, but all I could think about was how close he was, how easily I could just turn and no. I pushed the thought away, burying it under layers of denial. The truth was, every small interaction left a mark. A glance, a smile, a shared laugh. They were tiny moments, easy to overlook, but they stitched together into something I couldn't ignore anymore. And in that elevator, when he handed me back my book, it felt like all those sparks were quietly waiting for the right moment to ignite. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was tense, heavy, like something unspoken was hanging between us. I found myself stealing glances at him, wondering if he felt it too, wondering if his heart was racing the way mine was. I told myself I was imagining things, that this was just another fleeting crush moment, another memory I'd replay later when I was alone. But then he looked at me, really looked at me. His eyes held mine, steady and searching, as though he was about to say something important. And before I could gather my thoughts, the elevator jolted again, this time harder. The lights flickered, the machine groaned, and then it stopped. We weren't moving. My breath caught. My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. A dozen questions raced through my mind, but only one thought truly stuck. I'm stuck. In an elevator. With him. I didn't know whether to be terrified or secretly grateful. The hum of the elevator went silent, leaving behind only the faint buzz of the overhead light. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I just stood there, staring at the glowing panel of buttons that no longer responded, my heart beating so loudly I thought it might echo off the walls. "Looks like we're stuck," Ethan finally said, his voice calm, almost reassuring. He pressed the emergency button, waited, then sighed when nothing happened. Guess it's just you and me for a while. You and me. The way he said it sent warmth curling through my chest. I laughed nervously, clutching my books tighter. Of course this would happen today, I muttered, mostly to myself. He tilted his head. Bad day. I hesitated. Just long. I was ready to crawl into bed and forget about everything. His smile was small but genuine. Well, I'm not much of a bed, but I'll try to be decent company. I couldn't help but laugh, the tension in my shoulders loosening just a little. That was the thing about Ethan. He had this effortless way of making the air lighter, of drawing me out even when I wanted to retreat. Minutes passed. We talked about random things at first, classes, professors we both secretly dreaded, the ridiculous prices of campus food. But slowly, the conversation shifted. Can I tell you something? He asked after a lull, his voice lower now softer. Sure, I said, though my pulse quickened. I've always noticed you. In class, at the cafe. You have this focus. Like the world could be falling apart around you and you'd still keep going. I've always admired that. I froze. My mouth opened, then closed. Had I heard that right? My crush, the guy I thought barely knew my name, was admitting he'd been watching me too? The elevator felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. My heart thudded against my ribs as I tried to respond. I didn't think you noticed me at all. He leaned closer, just enough for me to catch the glint in his eyes. Oh, I noticed. The weight of those words settled between us, charged and undeniable. My fingers fidgeted with the edge of my book. My body caught between wanting to step back and wanting to step forward. Silence stretched again, but it wasn't awkward this time. It was electric. Every second felt like it was pulling us closer together, daring one of us to close the gap. Finally, I whispered, "This is crazy." Ethan's gaze never wavered. Maybe. But sometimes crazy is exactly what we need. And before I could second-guess myself, before I could retreat into the safety of what-ifs, he reached out. His hand brushed mine. Not an accident this time, but a choice. My breath hitched, and I didn't pull away. That single touch unraveled everything I tried to keep hidden. The sparks weren't just in my head. They were real, tangible, and there was no denying them anymore. In that still, humming silence of a broken elevator, the world outside faded away. It was just him and me, locked in a space where time seemed to pause, and where everything I had once been too afraid to hope for was suddenly within reach. We were no longer pretending. The moment his lips met mine, the world unraveled. It wasn't a shy kiss anymore. It was fire, sudden and consuming, the kind that stole my breath and left me trembling. All the months of unspoken glances, all the quiet yearning, they erupted in that single collision of lips, desperate and unstoppable. I pressed into him, clinging as though the walls of the elevator might disappear if I let go. His hands slid around my waist, strong and certain, pulling me flush against him. My books lay forgotten on the floor. The only thing that mattered was the heat of his body and the way his mouth moved with mine, deep, searching, insistent. Every kiss grew bolder, his lips trailing from my mouth to my jaw, down the sensitive curve of my neck. I gasped softly, fingers knotting into his shirt, pulling him closer, needing more of him. Each graze of his lips left a trail of fire across my skin, every whisper of breath making me shiver with anticipation. "Do you have any idea?" he murmured against my ear, his voice rough, low, intoxicating. "How long I've wanted this?" I barely managed to whisper back, "You're not the only one." Something in him broke at those words. His mouth found mine again, hungrier, as if he was devouring every moment we had lost. His fingers tangled with mine, gripping tightly, grounding me even as I felt myself floating. The confined elevator became a secret world of its own. The flickering light above cast shadows that danced across his face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the dark intensity in his eyes when he pulled back just long enough to look at me. His gaze alone made me weak, like he could see every hidden thought, every buried desire I had ever had for him. And then he kissed me again, deeper, harder. My back pressed against the cool wall of the elevator as he leaned into me, the contrast of cold metal and burning heat almost too much to bear. His hands roamed carefully, reverently, tracing the outline of my waist, my hips, as though he was discovering me for the first time. I couldn't stop the small sounds that escaped my lips, couldn't hold back the way my body arched toward his touch. He caught every gasp with another kiss, as if he needed all of me, every breath, every heartbeat. When he whispered my name again, low, reverent, trembling with restraint, it undid me completely. I melted beneath the sound, my whole body humming with the realization that this wasn't just desire. This was years of longing crashing into reality. The elevator could have stayed broken forever, and I wouldn't have cared. All I wanted was more of him. The taste of his lips, the warmth of his touch, the way he made me feel like nothing else had ever existed before this moment. Time became slippery, seconds stretching into eternity as we clung to each other. Every kiss was more urgent, every touch more daring, until I felt consumed, lost, and blissfully found all at once. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for the perfect moment, the elevator jolted back to life. The hum of machinery returned, the light steadied, and reality slipped back in. We froze, still pressed together, his forehead resting against mine as we caught our breath. My lips tingled, my body still trembling, my heart refusing to slow. His chest rose and fell against mine, proof that he was just as undone as I was. When the doors finally slid open, I knew one truth with piercing clarity. That night, in that broken elevator, everything changed. He wasn't just my college crush anymore. He was the man who had set me on fire with a single kiss. And nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke with the memory of his touch still imprinted on my skin. Every detail replayed in my head like a film I couldn't stop watching. The way his lips lingered against mine, the heat of his hands at my waist, the way he whispered my name as if it belonged to him. It didn't feel real. And yet, my reflection in the mirror betrayed me. Flushed cheeks, lips still tender, a softness in my eyes that hadn't been there before. I looked like a girl who had stepped into a secret she wasn't ready to share, a girl who had crossed the line between fantasy and reality. Campus life carried on as usual. Students rushing to class, laughter echoing in the quad, the scent of coffee drifting from the cafe. But for me, everything felt different. Every corner I turned, I half expected to see him. Every conversation felt muted compared to the electricity of that night. When I finally did see him, hours later, across the library, it was like the air shifted. His eyes found mine instantly, as though he had been waiting. A small smile tugged at his lips, subtle but filled with 1,000 unspoken words. My heart stuttered in response. We didn't run to each other. We didn't make a scene. But that look, that quiet exchange across the room, was enough to remind me that what happened wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It meant something. To him. To me. To us. Still, the questions haunted me. Would this change everything between us? Were we ready for what came next? Or was that night destined to remain a stolen memory, locked away in the shadows of a broken elevator? I didn't have the answers yet. All I knew was that I could still feel the warmth of his breath against my skin, still hear the echo of his voice whispering my name. And deep down, I knew I didn't want to forget it. Because that night wasn't just passion or chance, it was a shift, a beginning, the kind of moment that carved itself into my story forever. And no matter what happened next, I knew one thing for certain: I would never look at him the same way again. Have you ever been caught in a moment that changed everything? The kind of moment you still replay in your head, wishing it could last forever? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories.